The colony on Kepler 442b looked beautiful in the morning light. Two suns rose over the purple mountains, painting the sky in colors that Earth had never seen. Sarah Chen watched from her laboratory window as her daughter played in the garden outside. Little Maya was 5 years old, born on this new world. She had never seen Earth except in pictures. This was humanity's first real colony among the stars. After 10 years of peaceful contact with the Galactic Council, humans had finally gotten permission to settle on this empty planet. 3,000 people lived here now. Scientists, farmers, teachers, children. They called it New Hope. Sarah turned back to her microscope. She was studying the local plant life, trying to understand how to grow Earth crops in alien soil. It was slow work but important. Every small success meant humanity could spread further into the galaxy. The first sign of trouble was a shadow passing over the sun. Sarah looked up, confused. There were no clouds scheduled for today. The weather control systems kept the skies clear during working hours. But the shadow grew darker. Then she saw them. Ships. Hundreds of black ships dropping through the atmosphere like falling stones. The alarm siren started screaming. Sarah ran to the window. "Maya!" she shouted. Her daughter looked up from her toys, confused by the sudden noise. "Maya, come inside now." But it was already too late. The first bomb hit the center of the colony. The blast wave shattered every window in Sarah's building. She was thrown backward, her head hitting the wall. Through blurred vision, she saw the garden where Maya had been playing. It was gone. Just a smoking crater. The Vorthak had come. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Vorthak Empire. They were warriors, conquerors who had crushed 50 species under their rule. But they had signed peace treaties with the Galactic Council. They weren't supposed to attack council members. Humanity was protected. The bombs kept falling. Tom Rodriguez ran through the streets helping people get to the emergency shelters. He was just a teacher, but now he carried injured children while the sky burned above him. The Vorthak ships hung in the air like dark clouds, raining death on everything below. "Why?" an old woman cried as Tom helped her into a shelter. "We did nothing to them. We have no weapons here." Tom didn't have an answer. New Hope was a science colony. Their biggest weapons were farming tools. They had trusted the Galactic Council's protection. The attack lasted 6 hours. When the Vorthak ships finally stopped firing, New Hope was dead. The buildings were rubble. The gardens were ash. Of the 3,000 colonists, no one survived. The Vorthak had been thorough. They even destroyed the emergency shelters, burning out the hiding families with plasma fire. Marcus Way floated in the emergency pod, watching his home burn through the small window. He was the only survivor, and only because he had been doing repairs on a satellite when the attack started. His wife, his 2 sons, his entire life was down there in that smoke. The Vorthak ships turned toward him. Marcus closed his eyes, waiting for death, but they didn't fire. Instead, they caught his pod in a tractor beam and pulled him aboard. The Vorthak commander was 9 feet tall, covered in gray scales that looked like armor. Its 4 eyes studied Marcus with cold intelligence. "You will carry a message," it said in broken English. "Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them this is what happens when lesser species forget their place." "We did nothing wrong," Marcus whispered. "We had permission to be here." The commander's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "Permission? You are prey animals playing at being predators. The council lets you pretend to be equals, but you are not. You are weak. You will always be weak," the commander gestured to a screen. Marcus watched in horror as the attack was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species in the Galactic Council would see this. The Vorthak wanted everyone to watch. "This is discipline," the commander said. "You expanded too fast. You forgot that you exist because we allow it. Your people will cry. They will beg. They will pay tribute to the Vorthak Empire as all weak species must, and we will consider letting you survive." They threw Marcus back in his pod and sent him toward Earth. The journey would take 3 weeks with the emergency engine. 3 weeks floating alone with the images of his dead family burned into his mind. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices mixing in a chaos of languages. "The Vorthak have broken the treaty," the Altarian ambassador said, her feathers ruffled in anger. "They must be punished." The Vorthak ambassador, a smaller version of their warriors, stood calmly in the center. "We enforced necessary discipline. The humans expanded without proper authorization. They had authorization, the Altarian shouted. We all voted to approve the colony. A mistake, the Vorthak said simply. Prey species should not spread. It gives them dangerous ideas. Ambassador Jessica Park stood up. She was Earth's representative, a grandmother with gray hair and kind eyes. She had gotten the news an hour ago. 3,000 humans dead, including her own grandson, who had been a doctor on New Hope. You murdered children, she said, quietly. The chamber went silent. You murdered sleeping, families, scientists, teachers, children who had never held a weapon in their lives. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands shook. What possible threat were they to your empire? They were human, the Vorthak ambassador replied. That is threat enough. Your species is too ambitious. You learn too quickly. Better to teach you limits now, before you become a real problem. Several other ambassadors looked away. They had all suffered under Vorthak discipline at some point. They had all learned to bow their heads and pay tribute rather than fight back. Earth will want reparations, Ambassador Park said. The Vorthak laughed. Earth will get nothing. Earth will pay us for the cost of the ammunition we used. Earth will reduce its colonies to the home system only. Earth will learn its place, or we will teach harder lessons. Park stared at the Vorthak for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Every screen on the planet showed the same images. The beautiful colony burning. The children's playground turned to glass. The Vorthak ships hanging in the sky like demons from old stories. People gathered in the streets. They stood in silence watching the screens. Millions, then billions. In New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, Lagos. They stood and watched their first colony die over and over again as the recording played on repeat. World leaders met in emergency sessions. Military commanders presented options. All of them were bad. Earth had no warships. The technology gap was enormous. The Vorthak had been traveling the stars for 1,000 years. Humanity had barely started. We must negotiate, the President of the United States said. We can't fight them. They killed children, the Chinese premier replied. My sister's family was there. Her twin boys. 6 years old, I know. But what can we do? They have weapons that can crack planets. We have converted cargo ships with mining lasers. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the math. The Vorthak Empire controlled 50 star systems. They had millions of warriors. Technology that humanity couldn't match. Earth's united government met for 72 hours straight. No decisions were announced. No statements were made. The planet's communication systems went dark. No messages to the Galactic Council. No responses to alien queries, nothing. Other species found this silence strange. Usually, when the Vorthak attacked, the victims immediately started begging. They sent messages pleading for mercy, offering payment, promising submission. But Earth said nothing. The Vorthak commander, who had destroyed New Hope, was pleased. See, he told his officers. They are so frightened they cannot even speak. They huddle on their world like scared animals, trying to understand what happened. Soon they will cry. They always cry. He was wrong. In those 72 hours of silence, humanity did something that had never happened before in its long, violent history. It united, not in fear, not in submission, in rage. Every old argument between nations disappeared. Every resource was shared. Every scientist opened their classified files. Every factory began retooling. Every citizen volunteered for service. Humanity had wanted peace. They had reached for the stars with open hands, hoping to find friends. Instead, they had found predators who murdered children and called it discipline. The silence wasn't fear. It was the deep breath before the scream. The silence broke on the third day. Every communication channel in the galaxy lit up at once. But it wasn't a message to the Vorthak. It wasn't a plea to the Galactic Council. It was a simple broadcast to everyone, everywhere. Admiral Chen stood before the cameras in the United Earth Military Command. Behind her, the flags of every nation on Earth hung together. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but her eyes held something that made even the camera operators step back. 3 days ago, the Vorthak Empire murdered 3,000 human civilians on Kepler 442b. They broadcast this murder across the galaxy as a lesson. They expect us to cry. They expect us to beg. They expect us to submit. She paused. They are mistaken. The broadcast shifted to show factories across Earth. In Detroit, car assembly lines now built drones. In Shanghai, toy factories produced military processors. In Mumbai, medical equipment plants converted to weapons manufacturing. Every city, every nation moving with one purpose. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting itself, Admiral Chen continued. We have practiced war on every terrain, in every condition, against every type of enemy. We tried to leave that history behind when we reached the stars. The Vorthak have reminded us who we are. The screen showed crowds in the streets, not crying, not protesting, working, building, preparing. To the Vorthak Empire we say this: you killed our children. There will be no negotiations. There will be no tribute. There will be no mercy. The broadcast ended. In the Galactic Council chambers, ambassadors sat in stunned silence. The Altarian ambassador's feathers trembled. They can't be serious. The Vorthak will destroy them. The old Kethari ambassador, whose people had been under Vorthak rule for 3 centuries, shook his head slowly. I have studied human history. They once had a war where 20 million died. They learned from it and had another where 70 million died. They are very good at learning the wrong lessons. Marcus Way arrived at Earth just as the transformation was beginning. He expected to find a planet in mourning. Instead, he found something that scared him more than the Vorthak ships. Purpose. Every human on the planet moved with the same goal. Old enemies worked side by side. Russians and Americans shared military secrets. Israelis and Palestinians built weapons together. Indians and Pakistanis combined their nuclear programs. Marcus was taken directly to military command. They didn't want him to grieve. They wanted him to remember. Tell us everything, General Thompson said. Every detail about their ships, their weapons, their tactics, how they move, how they think. Marcus talked for hours. He drew diagrams of the Vorthak commander, described the interior of their ship, repeated every word that was said. Military scientists recorded everything. Their scales, Marcus said. They were proud of them. Said they were harder than our steel. A biochemist made notes. Natural armor. We'll need specific solutions. They have 4 eyes. They can see in different spectrums. Visual confusion tactics. Overwhelming sensory input. Every piece of information was cataloged, analyzed, weaponized. Dr. Lisa Park had been designing video games before the attack. Her specialty was artificial intelligence that could learn and adapt to player behavior. Now she stood in a military bunker, explaining her new project to generals. The Vorthak use predictive battle computers, she said. They calculate probabilities based on rational military doctrine. But humans aren't always rational. We do things that don't make sense. She showed them the code. This virus is based on a game AI that was so unpredictable, we had to ban it from online play. It made players quit because they couldn't understand its moves. Now imagine that chaos in their targeting systems. General Thompson nodded. How long to deploy? Give me 100 programmers in 2 weeks. You have 1,000 programmers in 1 week. Across the planet, similar conversations happened. A cancer researcher realized her nanobots could be programmed to attack Vorthak biology. A climatologist figured out how to weaponize weather. Children's toy designers built swarm intelligence into military drones. Humanity had always been creative. Now that creativity turned dark. The Vorthak Empire watched these developments with amusement. Commander Thrax, the destroyer of New Hope, laughed at the reports. They build toys, he told his officers. Small drones. Tiny robots. Computer programs. Do they think we are children to be scared by buzzing insects? His second-in-command was less certain. They are mobilizing their entire population. Every human is participating. Let them waste their resources. When they realize the futility, they will break. But something else was happening that the Vorthak didn't expect. The other young species in the galaxy were watching. The Delvani, who had paid tribute to the Vorthak for 50 years, saw humans working without sleep to build weapons. The Proxima, who had lost half their worlds to Vorthak expansion, watched human children collecting metal for recycling into ammunition. The Tau Cetians, who had surrendered without fighting, observed human elders volunteering for suicide missions. Secret messages began flowing to Earth, blueprints for Vorthak shield frequencies, maps of supply routes, weaknesses in their ship designs, Small species who had been stepped on for generations suddenly had hope, because humans were doing something unprecedented. They were not just refusing to submit, they were refusing to be rational about it. Ambassador Jessica Park returned to the Galactic Council. She looked different now. Harder. She had lost her grandson on New Hope, but tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. The Vorthak ambassador approached her. "Your silence is over. Now you will discuss terms of surrender." "No, no, you cannot win. You must know this. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your ships are cargo vessels with weapons attached. Your population is soft, untested." Park looked at him. "In 1940, my nation was attacked by a superior force. We had obsolete equipment and untrained soldiers. We won. In 1968, farmers with rifles defeated the most powerful military on Earth. In 2045, teenagers with homemade drones brought down a modern army. Primitive conflicts on a single world, the Vorthak dismissed. Practice, Park corrected. 10,000 years of practice. She turned to address the entire council. The Vorthak believe strength comes from technology and numbers. But humans have always won our wars with something else. Spite. Pure, irrational, self-destructive spite. We will throw ourselves into the fire just to make sure you burn too. The chamber was silent. "You want to know humanity's battle plan?" Park asked. "We don't have one. We have 7 billion individuals who lost children on New Hope. Each one will find their own way to make you pay. You can't predict chaos." Private James Miller was 19 years old. Before the attack, he had been studying to be a teacher like his sister. His sister who died on New Hope with her entire kindergarten class. Now he stood in a hangar looking at humanity's new fleet. They weren't really warships. Cargo haulers with armor welded on, mining vessels with military-grade lasers, transport ships packed with drones instead of passengers. "It's not much," his commanding officer admitted, "but it's what we have." James touched the photo in his pocket. His sister's last message sent the day before the attack. She was smiling, surrounded by her students. "All dead now." "It's enough," James said. Across Earth, similar scenes played out. Mothers who had lost children signed up for the most dangerous missions. Fathers who had watched their families die via broadcast volunteered for experimental weapons testing. Children too young to fight built ammunition in their schools. The Vorthak had made a fundamental error. They thought humans would react like other species. With fear, with submission, with rational assessment of the odds. But humans had never been rational about their children. Dr. Sarah Kim had been a psychologist before the attack. She specialized in grief counseling. Now she stood before the Earth Defense Council with a proposal that should have horrified her. "The Vorthak don't understand human psychology," she said. "They think we process loss like they do. But human grief doesn't make us weak. It makes us dangerous." She showed them the studies. Every culture on Earth has the concept of revenge, of blood debt, of destroying yourself to destroy your enemy. The Vorthak killed our children. They've activated something primal in our species. "What are you suggesting?" Admiral Chen asked. "Don't try to control it. Use it. Let the grief become rage. Let the rage become purpose. The Vorthak want rational opponents they can predict. Give them 7 billion individuals who have nothing left to lose." The vote was unanimous. Earth's response began small. Probe ships, barely armed, started appearing in Vorthak territory. They didn't attack. They just broadcasted. Images of the dead children. Their names. Their ages. Their dreams. Over and over again, the Vorthak destroyed them easily. But more kept coming. And with each broadcast, the rest of the galaxy remembered their own dead. Their own children killed by Vorthak discipline. Humanity was awakening. And with them, something was stirring in the hearts of every oppressed species. The Vorthak had expected Earth to cry. Instead, Earth had decided to make the galaxy scream. The first attack came without warning, just as the Vorthaks had. Commander Thrax woke to alarms screaming across his flagship. He rushed to the command center, expecting to see Earth's pathetic fleet attacking his defenses. Instead, he found his officers staring at empty screens. "What is happening?" he demanded. "The agricultural satellites, Commander. All of them. They've stopped working." Thrax checked the displays. Every satellite that managed food production for the Vorthak Empire had gone dark simultaneously. Not destroyed. Not damaged, just dead. How is this possible? "Those satellites are protected by military-grade encryption." His technology officer looked confused. "The attack code, sir." It appears to be based on something called a speedrun exploit. I don't understand it. It's using entertainment software patterns to bypass our security. Down in the Vorthak agricultural colonies, panic was beginning. The satellites controlled everything: water distribution, crop rotation, harvest timing. Without them, food production would fail within weeks. A message appeared on every Vorthak screen simultaneously. Not a demand or threat, just a simple text. Your children will know hunger, Thrax roared in rage. Find their fleet. Destroy them! Sir, there is no fleet. The attack came from Earth, from civilian computers linked together. Millions of them. The commander's four eyes widened. Civilians. Earth was using civilians as weapons. Captain Maria Santos commanded the cargo ship, Remember New Hope. It wasn't a warship. 2 weeks ago, it had been hauling medical supplies between Earth and Mars. Now it drifted near a Vorthak supply line, pretending to be debris. Her crew of 20 were all volunteers. All had lost someone on Kepler 442b. Vorthak convoy approaching, her sensor operator reported. 12 ships. Military escorts around supply vessels. Let them pass, Maria ordered. The crew looked confused. Captain? Maria smiled grimly. We're not here for the ships. After the convoy passed, the Remember New Hope came alive. It dropped 10,000 small devices, each no bigger than a baseball. They scattered across space, dormant. 3 hours later, another convoy came through. The devices activated, they didn't explode. They screamed. Each device broadcasted the last messages from New Hope. Children crying for their parents. Parents calling for their children. The colony's final moments played at maximum volume across every frequency. The Vorthak convoy stopped, confused. The psychological attack was so primitive, so unexpected, they didn't know how to respond. Their warriors were trained to fight enemies, not listen to dying children. That's when the real attack came. While the Vorthak were distracted, 12 more cargo ships appeared. They launched mining drones, thousands of them, programmed with one simple command: eat metal. The drones swarmed the convoy. They weren't military weapons. They were designed to break apart asteroids. But Vorthak ships were made of metal too. The proud warships were consumed from the outside in. Warriors trained for battle found themselves fighting mining equipment. They destroyed hundreds of drones, but thousands more kept coming. The supply vessels were gutted. Food, medicine, equipment for 3 Vorthak colonies all destroyed, not by warships but by repurposed mining tools. One escort survived. Maria let it go. Let them tell the Empire, she said. Humans don't fight fair. The Galactic Council watched in horrified fascination. The Altarian ambassador pulled up human military history, trying to understand. Guerrilla warfare, she read. Asymmetric tactics. Psychological operations. They've been perfecting these techniques for millennia. The Cathari ambassador nodded slowly. The Vorthak have always fought civilized wars. Fleet meets fleet. Warriors face warriors. Humans fight like animals, like they're still in their prehistoric phase. It's working, someone whispered, and it was. The Vorthak Empire, which had never lost a war, was being slowly picked apart by converted cargo ships and civilian hackers. Dr. Marcus Chen had been a marine biologist before the war. He studied how Earth's predators hunted. Now he applied those lessons to space warfare. The Vorthak think in terms of strength, he explained to the Admiralty. Big ships. Powerful weapons. Direct confrontation. But Earth's most successful predators aren't the strongest. They're the most patient. He showed them his plan. We can't match their fleet, but we can make them afraid to use it. The plan was simple and terrifying. Human ships started appearing near Vorthak worlds, dropping small satellites and disappearing. The satellites did nothing. They just floated there silent. The Vorthak destroyed them, of course, but more kept appearing. Hundreds, thousands, silent, waiting. Then one activated near a military shipyard. It was carrying a modified mining laser, barely strong enough to cut through armor, but it wasn't aimed at the ships. It was aimed at the shipyard's water supply. The laser superheated the water storage tanks. The explosion destroyed half the facility. Now the Vorthak had a choice. Destroy every human satellite immediately, wasting massive resources, or leave them alone and wonder which ones were weapons. They chose to destroy them all. But humans kept sending more. Cheap, disposable satellites that might be weapons or might be nothing. The Vorthak were spending millions of credits destroying what were essentially empty boxes. Fear began spreading through the Empire. Not fear of defeat, but fear of the unknown. Every piece of space debris might be a human trap. Every communication might carry a virus. Every trade ship might be a bomb. The volunteer forces were the worst part for the Vorthak to understand. Lieutenant Eva Johansson had been a kindergarten teacher. She had taught some of the children who died on New Hope. Now she piloted a single-person craft toward a Vorthak communications relay. Her ship was too small for weapons, too small for shields. It was basically an engine with a cockpit and a nuclear reactor set to overload. The Vorthak detected her approach. "Human vessel, you will be destroyed if you continue." "I know," Eva replied. "You will die. I know." "Why? What can one small ship accomplish?" Eva thought of little Sarah Chen, who had loved to draw pictures of the two suns, of Tommy Rodriguez, who wanted to be a scientist like his father. "All dead now. I'm not trying to accomplish anything," she said. "I'm just very, very angry." She hit the overload button. The explosion took out the relay and 3 Vorthak patrol ships. More importantly, it sent a message. Humans would trade their lives for Vorthak deaths. Happily. Within days, hundreds more volunteers were making similar runs. Teachers, farmers, engineers, parents who had lost children. They weren't soldiers. They were ordinary people who had decided that living in a galaxy where child killers prospered wasn't worth it. The Vorthak had never faced an enemy like this. Every species they had conquered had calculated the odds and surrendered when defeat seemed certain. Humans calculated the odds and attacked anyway. Commander Thrax stood before the Empire's War Council. For the first time in his life, he looked uncertain. "Their tactics are not warfare," he insisted. "They use mining equipment, children's toys, civilian computers. They attack food supplies and water systems. They send teachers on suicide missions." "You said they were weak," the Supreme Admiral noted coldly. "They are weak. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are cargo haulers. Their weapons are repurposed tools, but they don't fight like they're weak. They fight like they're insane." The Supreme Admiral reviewed the reports. In 3 weeks, humanity had destroyed more Vorthak assets than the last 3 rebellions combined. Not through military might, but through pure chaotic aggression. "Pull the fleets back to the core worlds," he ordered. "Establish a defensive perimeter, Supreme Admiral." Thrax was shocked. The Vorthak had never played defense. "These humans are like a disease, unpredictable, irrational. We need to contain them until we understand their nature." But it was already too late for containment. The message came through every speaker in the Vorthak Empire simultaneously, not from Earth's government or military, from a 10-year-old girl named Sophie Martinez. "My little brother was on New Hope," she said. "He was 3. He liked to sing songs about stars." The transmission showed her in what looked like a school classroom. Behind her, hundreds of other children were working on something. "You killed him. You killed all of them, so we're going to kill your empire." The camera panned to show what the children were building. Millions of tiny drones, each one carrying a simple message that would broadcast on repeat. The names of the dead children from New Hope. "We learned in school that drops of water can carve through stone," Sophie said. "We're going to be the water." The transmission ended. Within hours, those drones began appearing throughout Vorthak space. Millions of them. Built by children in schools across Earth, they did no physical damage. They just spoke names, over and over. On every frequency. Sarah Chen, age 5, Michael Park, age 7, Tommy Rodriguez, age 6. The psychological effect was devastating. Vorthak warriors trained to fight armies found themselves haunted by the voices of dead children. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't think. Everywhere they went, the names followed. Some Vorthak began to crack. They had killed in war before, but it had always been soldiers, warriors. These had been younglings, and now their names echoed through the Empire like a curse. The Vorthak had expected humanity to fight with honor. Instead, humanity fought with grief. And grief, they were learning, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The message came through encrypted channels, bounced through 17 different relays to avoid detection. Admiral Chen read it 3 times before she believed it. "The Proxima want to help," she told the Earth Defense Council. "They're offering intelligence on Vorthak defensive positions." General Thompson was suspicious. "Why? They've been under Vorthak rule for 60 years. "Because we're winning," Chen replied. For the first time in generations, someone is making the Vorthak bleed. The small species are starting to hope. The intelligence was good, too good. It showed the location of the Vorthak's main fleet, gathering near their fortress world of Thraxis Prime. 3,000 warships, the largest concentration of military power in the galaxy. It's bait, someone said. They want us to attack their strongest point. Of course it's bait, Chen agreed. But look closer. The Proxima didn't just send positions. They sent duty rosters, maintenance schedules, the names of every commander who has grown lazy after centuries of easy victories. More messages began arriving. The Delvani shared shield frequencies. The Tausidians provided supply route information. Even the ancient Cathari, who had been slaves for 300 years, sent what they could. A complete psychological profile of the Vorthak species. Dr. Sarah Kim read the profile with growing excitement. They're not just warriors. They're ritualistic warriors. Every battle follows patterns. Every victory must be celebrated in specific ways. They've been doing the same thing for 1,000 years. So? Thompson asked. So they can't adapt? Not quickly. Their entire military doctrine is based on tradition, honor, predictable escalation. We've already proved they don't know how to handle chaos. Now we can prove they don't know how to handle change. The plan they developed shouldn't have worked. It required too many moving parts, too much coordination between species that had never worked together. But desperation made strange alliances. The assault on Thraxis Prime began with rocks, not weapons. Just rocks. Asteroids, to be specific. Captain James Park commanded a mining vessel that had been pushing asteroids for 20 years. Now he pushed them toward Thraxis Prime. Not fast enough to be weapons, just fast enough to be annoying. Incoming asteroids, the Vorthak sensors detected. Trajectory suggests they'll reach the planet in 14 months. Commander Thrax studied the data, confused. 14 months? Yes, sir. They're moving at mining speeds. We can destroy them easily, but what? There are thousands of them, and more being redirected every day, Thrax laughed. They think they can siege us with slowly moving rocks? Destroy them. But every asteroid destroyed was replaced by 3 more. Mining ships throughout the system were working continuously, adjusting asteroid orbits by tiny amounts. Each adjustment sent another rock toward Thraxis Prime. The Vorthak could destroy them all, of course, but it would take constant vigilance, constant ammunition, constant fuel, for over a year. They're not trying to hit us, Thrax's tactical officer realized. They're trying to exhaust us. While the Vorthak were distracted by the slowest bombardment in military history, the real attack was happening in their communications network. 12-year-old Kevin Chen sat in his bedroom on Earth, playing what looked like a video game. But he wasn't playing. He was programming. Along with 50,000 other children around the world, he was part of humanity's digital youth corps. Ready? His team leader asked over the headset. She was 15. Ready, Kevin confirmed. They launched the attack simultaneously. Not a virus designed to destroy, but something far worse. A virus designed to confuse. Every Vorthak military communication suddenly had a 2-second delay. Not enough to cripple them, but enough to be annoying. Every tactical display showed data from 3 seconds ago. Every weapon system required an extra confirmation to fire. The Vorthak technology officers went insane trying to fix it. Every time they adapted, the virus evolved. Because it wasn't one virus, it was 50,000 kids, each tweaking the code in real time. Like the world's most destructive online game. My high score is 17 system crashes, Kevin announced proudly. His 8-year-old sister, looking over his shoulder, said, I could do better. You're too young for the Corps. I'm old enough to hate them, she replied, thinking of her best friend who had died on New Hope. The resistance movements began small. On Delvin III, workers in a Vorthak ammunition factory started making tiny changes. Every 1,000th shell was manufactured with a minor flaw. Not enough to notice in quality control, but enough to jam a weapon at the worst moment. On Proxima 7, engineers maintaining Vorthak ships quietly reversed 2 wires in navigation systems. The ships still flew perfectly, but their emergency jump calculations would be off by just a few degrees. Enough to exit hyperspace inside a star if they weren't careful. On 12 different worlds, small species who had been crushed for generations found tiny ways to resist. Because humanity had shown them it was possible, the Vorthak Empire, built on fear and strength, was being eaten away from the inside by hope. Marcus Way stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, if you could call a converted cargo hauler a flagship. The Vengeance for New Hope had more welded patches than original hull, but it was about to do something no one thought possible. All volunteers report ready, his communications officer announced. 300 ships, not one of them military. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, transport ships, even a few private yachts, each one piloted by someone who had lost family on New Hope. The Vorthak fleet? Marcus asked. Still defending against the asteroids. They've destroyed 8,000 so far. 40,000 more to go. Marcus smiled grimly. Begin Phase 2. The human fleet appeared at the edge of the Thraxis system just outside weapon range. The Vorthak immediately moved to intercept, but the human ships didn't advance. They just sat there. Then they began broadcasting. Not threats or demands. History lessons. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers held off thousands. The Siege of Stalingrad, where a surrounded city refused to surrender. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where civilians fought tanks with bottles and stones. Vietnam, Afghanistan. Every time a smaller force had defeated a larger one through sheer determination. What are they doing? Thrax demanded. His cultural officer was pale. They're teaching us, sir. Teaching us their history, showing us that they've been fighting superior forces for 10,000 years. The broadcast continued for hours. Days. The human ships just floated there, outside weapon range, teaching the galaxy about human stubbornness. Then came the real message. Admiral Chen appeared on every screen in the Vorthak fleet. Behind her stood representatives from the Proxima, the Delvani, the Taucedians, and dozen other species. You thought you were fighting Earth, she said simply. You're not. You're fighting everyone you ever stepped on, every species you ever conquered, every child you ever killed. We're all human now. The combined fleet that emerged from hyperspace was impossible. 60 different species, most of them supposedly conquered, had contributed ships. They weren't warships. They were the same as humanity's fleet, converted civilian vessels armed with mining equipment and spite. But there were thousands of them. The Vorthak fleet was still superior. Their weapons were better, their shields stronger, their warriors more experienced. In any conventional battle, they would win easily. But this wasn't a conventional battle. The Allied fleet didn't attack. They surrounded the Thraxis system and began building. Mining ships created automated defense platforms from asteroids. Cargo vessels deployed billions of those tiny drones that broadcast the names of dead children. Science ships started analyzing the local star, calculating how to trigger solar flares. They're not fighting us, Thrax realized with growing horror. They're containing us. Every ship that tried to leave the system was swarmed by suicide drones. Not destroyed, just damaged enough to force retreat. The message was clear. You can stay in your fortress or you can die trying to leave. The psychological warfare intensified. Humanity shared every piece of their history with the galaxy. Every revolution, every uprising, every time the oppressed had risen against their oppressors. They showed the fall of empires that had seemed invincible. Rome, the British Empire, the Soviet Union. They taught the galaxy that every empire falls, and they usually fall from within. Vorthak morale began to crack. Warriors who had never known defeat were trapped in their own system, surrounded by prey that refused to act like prey. They couldn't sleep because of the constant broadcasts of dead children's names. They couldn't trust their technology because of constant virus attacks. They couldn't even trust their food, as reports came in of resistance movements poisoning supply chains. Some Vorthak commanders began to question. They had killed children, innocent younglings, for what? To maintain an empire that was now crumbling? The first defection shocked everyone. Captain Vrexus of the Vorthak 3rd Fleet broadcast a message to both sides. I have 2 younglings of my own. I cannot serve an empire that murders younglings. I surrender my ship to the Allied fleet. Thrax ordered Vrexus executed for treason. But 3 more ships defected the next day, then 10. Then dozens. The Vorthak Empire wasn't being defeated by enemies. It was being torn apart by conscience. The war had reached its turning point. Not through strength or technology, but through something much simpler. The surrender request came at 300 Earth Standard Time. Admiral Chen read it twice, not believing what she was seeing. The Vorthak Empire, which had never lost a war in 2,000 years, was asking for terms. It could be a trap, General Thompson warned. Of course it's a trap, Chen replied. The question is whether it's also genuine. The message was from Supreme Admiral Korthax himself, the highest military authority in the Vorthak Empire. He wanted to meet, face to face. No weapons, no fleets, just conversation. The location he proposed was symbolic, the ruins of New Hope. Marcus Wei piloted the shuttle himself. Admiral Chen sat beside him, looking at the dead world below. Where gardens once grew, there was only glass and ash. Where children once played, there was silence. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked. Chen touched the picture in her pocket. Her great-nephew, 6 years old, who had been visiting the colony with his teacher. No, but that's why we have to do it. The Vorthak shuttle was already waiting. Supreme Admiral Korthak stood in the ruins of what had been the colony's school. He was older than most Vorthak, his scales dulled with age. Commander Thrax stood beside him, the one who had ordered the attack. You came, Korthak said simply. We came, Chen confirmed. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the ghosts of 3,000 dead. Why? Chen finally asked. Why did you kill them? Korthax looked at the ruins. Because we were afraid. Thrax made a sound of protest, but Korthax silenced him with a gesture. For 2,000 years, we have ruled through fear. Every species we encountered was either conquered or destroyed. It was simple, clean. Then you came. He turned to face Chen. You reached for the stars with open hands. You traded freely. You learned quickly. Too quickly. In 10 years, you went from primitive spacecraft to colony ships. In another 10, you would have matched us. In 50, surpassed us. So you killed children. We did what we have always done. We demonstrated strength. We expected you to submit as every species has submitted. Korthax's 4 eyes showed something that might have been regret. We did not expect you to go insane. Chen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Insane? You murdered our babies and expected us to thank you for the lesson? Every other species has. We're not every other species. We're the species that spent 10,000 years practicing war on ourselves. We're the species that invented nuclear weapons and used them on our own kind. We're the species that burned our own planet almost to death and kept fighting over the ashes. She stepped closer. But more than that, we're the species that loves our children more than we fear death. You killed them. What happened next was inevitable. Korthax was quiet for a long moment. Your tactics. Using civilians, children, turning our vassals against us. These are not the actions of a civilized species. No, Chen agreed. They're the actions of parents who lost their children. You've destroyed our economy, shattered our military structure, turned our own empire against us. Half our fleet has defected or rebelled, the other half is trapped in our home system, slowly going insane from your psychological warfare. And we need it to stop, Chen studied him. What are your terms? Terms? Korthax seemed surprised. We are surrendering unconditionally. We expect you to demand tribute, territory, perhaps our complete destruction. We don't want your territory. We don't want tribute. Then what? Chen looked at the ruins around them. Justice. The terms humanity set were unlike anything in galactic history. First, every Vorthak officer involved in the attack on New Hope would stand trial. Not in a human court, but in a court made up of representatives from every species the Vorthak had conquered. Let the galaxy judge them. Second, the Vorthak Empire would be dissolved. Not conquered, dissolved. Each species would regain independence. The Vorthak would keep their home system and nothing else. Third, and this was the part that shocked everyone, the Vorthak would spend the next century helping rebuild every world they had damaged. Not as conquerors or rulers, but as workers. They would use their advanced technology to repair the damage they had caused. You want us to serve those we conquered? Thrax could not hide his outrage. We want you to heal what you broke, Chen corrected. Your choice is simple. Agree to these terms, or we continue the war. You would exterminate us? No, we would contain you forever. Your system surrounded by automated defenses. Your technology frozen in time while the rest of the galaxy advances. Your children growing up in a cage knowing their parents put them there. She paused. In 1,000 years, the Vorthak would be a footnote. A cautionary tale about what happens to empires that murder children. Korthax looked at Thrax, then back to Chen. And if we agree, if we serve, then in 100 years you can apply to join the galactic community as equals. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, As one species among many, you would forgive us. Chen thought of her great-nephew. Of all the dead children, no, we will never forgive. But our children might. If you earn it. The transformation of the galaxy began immediately. On 100 worlds, Vorthak administrators handed over power to local governments. On 1,000 ships, Vorthak commanders surrendered to former vassals. The empire that had ruled for 2 millennia dissolved in days. Some Vorthak couldn't accept it. A few tried to fight, to maintain their hold on conquered worlds. They were dealt with quickly. Not by humans, but by the newly freed species who had learned humanity's lessons about total war. Most Vorthak, however, submitted. They had been shown what happened when a species truly committed to destruction. They had no desire to see it again. The trials began 6 months later. Commander Thrax stood before a tribunal of 17 species. The families of the New Hope victims sat in the gallery watching. Some cried. Some sat in stone silence. All waited for justice. The evidence was presented simply. The attack footage, the death toll, the ages of the victims. Thrax did not deny any of it. Do you have anything to say? The tribunal asked. Thrax looked at the families. At Marcus Way, whose wife and sons had died. At Sophie Martinez, whose 3-year-old brother had been killed. At thousands of faces marked by grief. I was following the doctrine of my empire, he said. For 2,000 years, this was how we maintained order. And now? The tribunal asked. Thrax was silent for a long moment. Now I understand that order built on the deaths of younglings is not order at all. It is evil. He was sentenced to life, not in prison but in service. He would spend his remaining years working on the memorial being built on New Hope. Every day he would help maintain the gardens being planted where children had died. Every night he would sleep in sight of the monument that listed their names. It was both mercy and punishment. He would live, but he would never forget. Earth became something new in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not rulers, but teachers. Species came to learn how humanity had defeated the Vorthak. The answer confused them. You didn't defeat them with technology, the Altarian ambassador said. No, Admiral Chen agreed. You didn't defeat them with military might. No. Then how? Chen smiled sadly. We defeated them with grief, with rage, with the absolute refusal to accept a galaxy where murdering children was considered acceptable. She looked out at the stars. Every species in the galaxy now knows something about humans. We prefer peace. We dream of exploration and friendship. But if you force us to war, we don't fight to win. We fight to make sure everyone loses. And we're very, very good at it. The memorial on New Hope was completed 2 years later. It wasn't just a monument. The entire colony was rebuilt, but differently. Each building was a school, a place of learning named after one of the victims. The gardens were replanted, each tree representing a lost life. At the center stood a simple statue. A human child and a Vorthak youngling, playing together. The inscription read, "They expected humanity to cry, we cried. Then we changed the galaxy." Marcus Way stood at the memorial reading the names. His wife, his sons. 3,000 souls who had died for the crime of being human. Sophie Martinez stood beside him. She was 12 now. One of the youngest members of the digital youth corps that had brought down an empire with computer viruses and video game exploits. Do you think they would be proud? She asked. Marcus thought about it. I think they would be sad that we had to become what we became. But yes, proud that we changed things, that their deaths meant something. Commander Thrax worked nearby, carefully tending the memorial garden. He looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. There was no forgiveness there, might never be. But there was understanding. The understanding that some crimes could never be undone, only remembered. The galaxy was different now. The Vorthak worked on 100 worlds, rebuilding what they had destroyed. Former vassal species governed themselves for the first time in generations, and everyone everywhere knew the lesson of New Hope. Humans had wanted peace. They had reached for the stars with joy and wonder. But when pushed, when their children were threatened, they became something else, something terrifying. The weapons were put away. The converted cargo ships returned to hauling supplies. The children went back to school. Humanity returned to what it had always wanted to be, explorers, scientists, dreamers. But the galaxy never forgot what humanity could become if pushed. The species that would burn the galaxy down rather than bow to tyranny.